Ladies and gentlemen, while Donald Trump was honk shoeing and memeing his way through the NBA Finals game that he absolutely disrupted with his presence and ruined for New Yorkers, there was a war that was being waged where an American Apache helicopter was struck. And what we find out now was by a drone, was taken out. Helicopter pilots were saved in the process, it seems. Trump announced that it was Iran that shot down the Apache off the coast of Oman and that the U.S. must respond. I have just been informed by our great military that last night the Iranians shot down one of our highly sophisticated Apache helicopters while patrolling over the Strait of Hormuz. There were 2 pilots involved. Both are safe and uninjured. Nevertheless, the United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. A U.S. official told Barack Ravi that the investigation determined that the Iranian drone hit the U.S. helicopter and got it to crash. The U.S. official said the investigation still hasn't determined if it was intentional or not. Barry says if it truly was a drone, then that's on the helicopter pilot for not avoiding it. Was likely not the intentional target. CNN claims it was a Shahed, definitely not the intended target if true. Yes, Shahed drones do not have the capability of striking moving targets like that, especially a target that's moving like a helicopter. Like that's not a slow moving target. So that dude flew into the Shahed drone. If it's actually a Shahed drone. Galabaf says, we prefer the language of diplomacy, but we speak other languages far more fluently. Break your commitments and we'll switch to what we speak best. You ride the horse you saddle. Let's take a look at what Al Jazeera said.
All right, we have just gotten some breaking news that we wanted to break in to tell you about. President Trump has just posted on Truth Social. I'm going to read it here. He says, I've just been informed by our great military that last night the Iranians shot down one of our highly sophisticated Apache helicopters while patrolling over the Strait of Hormuz. There were 2 pilots involved. Both are safe and uninjured. Nevertheless, the United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So obviously this comes in the midst of President Trump trying to sort of tamp down tensions between the Israelis and the Iranians in recent days, and even saying earlier that he believed that a deal between the United States and Iran to bring this war to an end once and for all could come within 2 or 3 days. Obviously now, potentially, that calculus could be changing. Let's go now to Iran, where our Al-Migdad Al-Rahaid is standing by for us. So Al-Migdad, what do we know about what happened here? And obviously this is early, but do we have any indication of anything from the Iranian side?
Well, actually, from what I understand, this is apparently a very serious escalation, depending on what Donald Trump just posted on social media. But from here, we don't have an official response to this event. But at the same time, we do know that the Strait of Hormuz, the vicinity of the Strait of Hormuz, is a territorial that right now IRGC Navy and the Iranian army projecting what they called their sovereignty, their defiance, their controlling such an important area. And we've just yesterday heard from military commanders, Qa'ani, belong to Al-Quds fleet, belong to the IRGC, said that there's a new security measures linked between Bab al-Mandeb and also between the Strait of Hormuz, all the way from the Strait of Hormuz to the Bab al-Mandeb at the entrance of the Red Sea. So this is an area controlled by the
Mills Mafia is back on, baby. Janet Pills Mills Mafia.
IRGC and their allies. So while that's happening, they are sending a very firm and red lines for this control area geographically and also sovereignty. And we do know that this is a battlefield between Iranian and Americans over the past few weeks. We have seen a lot of escalatory events between both sides, especially when it comes to the naval blockade imposed by the United States Navy in the Arabian Sea, and also between the IRGC controlling such a strategic corridor. And now we have just heard from the Donald Trump that the Apache have been landed by the IRGC, by the Iranian, and such as an important event right now. We do know that this can be a new calculation between both sides, and we do know that the IRGC projecting their full controls into that geographical area from the entrance of the from the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz, and there is a designated route for shipping and maritime shipping. Actually, they are presenting that as their new equation in the Strait of Hormuz, new reality on the Strait of Hormuz, which is becoming one of the main sticking point over the past few weeks in negotiating table. And right now, this is add another complexity to the already delicate situation when it comes to this particular front, adding to the southern Lebanon, to the southern of suburbs in Lebanon. So that all of that happening right now bring us the idea of
And by the way, yeah, black socialists are not monolithic, so
mistrust between Iranian and Americans when it comes to proceeding with the negotiations. And we have seen a lot of...
What the fuck? What the fuck just happened?
President Trump just...
Al Jazeera just deleted that video while we were watching it. What the fuck?
Provided an update on that U.S. military helicopter crash. He said, I have just been informed by our great military that last night Iranians shot down one of our highly sophisticated Apache helicopters while patrolling over the Strait of Hormuz. There were 2 pilots involved. Both are safe and uninjured. Nevertheless, the United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. I want to go straight to the White House to Elena Treen. Elena, what more are you hearing about what the president might be referring to in terms of responding?
Yeah, I think what this response will entail is obviously the key question here. We haven't gotten any more information other than what the president had just shared on social media. But I think one of the key parts of this post, Dana, is that he is saying that it was the Iranians that shot down this Apache helicopter. That is more information, of course, than we have gotten. This statement from CENTCOM this morning, all it had said was that the cause of the incident is under investigation, not giving any information about who was responsible. Well, Trump is now saying it is the Iranians who were responsible for downing that helicopter and that they have to respond, the United States, out of necessity. Very much unclear, again, what he means by this, if he means potential strikes or something else. But that can definitely, of course, be a major complicating factor after a very few tense days in this war, really, after, of course, we saw Israel and Iran exchanging fire, the president getting them to back off. Now he's been optimistic. The latest we heard from him this morning, very optimistic about a deal, but now saying he needs to respond to this. And I do want to provide some...
Isn't it kind of surprising that they're not even trying to cover it up? It is a little bit suspicious.
Information about the importance of these Apaches, because this marks the downing of this helicopter, the first time an Apache was lost since this war began. Typically, they have been responsible for precision attacks on some of these Iranian small boats. We know that.
I don't understand how an Apache helicopter runs into a fucking Shahed drone, by the way. I don't understand it. It genuinely doesn't make sense. Like, the helicopter had to have dove in the direction of the Shahed drone if that's the case. The Shahed drone would have been targeting something different, and the Apache either engaging in like an evasive maneuver, wasn't able to evade it, and fell in the water or something, or they just like, I mean, if they fucking got hit, they got dinged by the drone, I don't even know how the pilots survive. I don't understand how pilots survive helicopter crashes to begin with. Airspace entirely the airspace is entirely clear from Iran to Israel. Strikes are incoming very soon, as clear airspace is always the first sign. The helicopter would not survive a hit. The Apache likely shot the drone down and the drone exploded, causing it to get hit by the shrapnel. Yeah, maybe. There's something about this story that just like simply doesn't make sense. Some reports saying that Iran hit an Apache with a hybrid drone missile, 358 SA-67, a loitering SAM, a loitering surface-to-air missile, which makes more sense than a standard Shahed. Launched from a rail guide, it can loiter for hours before honing in on an enemy helicopter or drones. Yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. This is what the Houthis were also using, right? I'm pretty sure. Didn't the Houthis also fucking use this to specifically ding an F-35 as well, or come very close to taking out an F-35? There's, I mean, it doesn't make sense if it's a Shahed drone, because the Shahed drones are like, you release them towards a stationary target and it goes and hits the target. So if it was a Shahed drone, it would either have to be a helicopter trying to intercept the Shahed drone, and then, the Shahed drone hits it, or the helicopter was like stationary in the air. I don't know. Like, it was just like flying around and got hit. It just doesn't make sense. Like, you literally had to have flown into the Shahed drone. The only two options are, if it's a Shahed drone, they either tried to intercept it and it exploded too close, and they had to crash the chopper. I don't know. I thought some of them can be remote controlled. No, the Shahed drones are good at hitting stationary targets.
Have been operating in the Strait of Hormuz, the United States using them as part of the Iranian blockade. So all to say, it's unclear what this response is going to be. I think we have a lot of work to do in our reporting with our sources on what this is going to look like. And I also think the fact that the president is even coming out and saying that there needs to be a response is a huge signal in how he's trying to handle this entire moment at a very fragile time for the ceasefire negotiations, Dana.
Yeah, it's so true. All of the factors here are very important. Thank you for bringing us this breaking news.
Let's go now to CNN's Zach Cohen. Zach, tell us what you are hearing from sources and from the Pentagon.
Yeah, guys, we now know from 2 U.S. officials that it was an Iranian drone that took down this Apache helicopter that was operating around the Strait of Hormuz. And now we're told this is an Iranian Shahed drone. This is one of...
By the way, put that up on the fucking leaderboard. That's another like multi-million-dollar asset lost in this process. Just, I know we're just burning through it like it's nobody's business, but it is still fucking insane that it's happening at all.
Thousands of these types of one-way attack drones that Iran still has in its arsenal, despite the fact that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon have insisted that Iran's military capabilities have been heavily degraded. And again, this is a reminder, too, of the threat that Iran still poses, not just to U.S. vessels and aircraft operating in that key waterway, but also the commercial vessels that have not yet...
The drone is faster than the helicopter, buddy. It's one of those things where you just get out of the way. What are you talking about? If it's a Shahed drone, it's on its way to hit a stationary target. I don't think Iran has the capability of, the Shahed drones can't hit a helicopter.
Started to regularly transit for fear of attacks from the Iranian regime. And so this is a new detail.
Chatters bring up a very important and, dare I say, very good point. Okay. I'm sorry. I'll have you know, if this helicopter wasn't shot down, Iran would have a nuclear weapon. And I guess you're right, Chatter. We shouldn't forget that. And I'm glad you maintained this position. My sources are telling me Iran was merely seconds away from a nuclear, from developing nuclear arsenal. They were enriching the uranium, and they were too busy hitting that Apache helicopter, so they forgot to enrich uranium beyond that point. So I'm glad that we're out there still fighting the good fight. None of it matters, but the U.S. blockade of Iran as a war crime as a part of illegal war of aggression launched February 28th. International law seems so quaint now. Even legacy media, which until February 28th pontificated so much about the rule of law, miraculously lost interest just in time. Yeah, that my sources are telling me the Shahed drone was carrying the enriched uranium, actually, and these helicopter pilots bravely stopped it from, I don't know, doing a little tour over the Gulf of Oman and then coming back and then enriching the uranium inside of Iran or something. I don't even fucking know anymore. Who gives a shit, right? Fuck it. We ball. Just make stuff up. Yeah, it was carrying the nuclear dust.
Today, because earlier this morning, the Pentagon said it was still investigating what happened, what led to this crash of the Apache helicopter around the Strait of Hormuz. We now know, thanks to President Trump's tweet and subsequent confirmation from U.S. officials, that it was an Iranian drone. Now, what remains unclear at this stage, though, is what the intent was, if this was an intentional attack by the Iranians or if it was a collision of some kind. But obviously, if you read the president's statement, that Truth Social post right there, it doesn't really seem that he sees a difference between the two, and that he feels it's important that the U.S. aircraft was hit by an Iranian drone and that the U.S. now, quote, must respond.
And Zach, do we know what options are being weighed as a response?
Yeah, Boris, the military has been developing a series of options. We've seen them also respond to other Iranian attacks, aggressive actions around the Strait of Hormuz over the last few days even. It will be interesting to see if the U.S. response is ultimately proportional or if Donald Trump does order the military to carry out something more significant. We know the military has been developing a target list of potential targets around the Strait of Hormuz, things like these drone launch sites, missile launch sites, things that are key to Iran's ability to pose a threat to vessels operating in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, which is effectively how they've shut.
Now's about the time to also maintain our support for the big, beautiful president and his big, beautiful ballroom. I do feel like if the president had a ballroom, this probably would have also not happened. Just want to point that out. If the president had his big, beautiful ballroom, this situation probably would not have taken place. A lot of people don't want to recognize that. Trump says Iran shot down U.S. helicopter. U.S. will respond. A U.S. Army AH-64 Apache helicopter went down near the Strait of Hormuz off the coast of Oman Monday, with both crew members rescued within hours and reported in stable condition by U.S. authorities. President Trump said on Truth Social that Iran shot down the helicopter and that the U.S. must, out of necessity, respond. Iran's RGC Navy claimed it shot down the aircraft after it ignored warnings targeting it with fire from a speedboat. The Pentagon has not confirmed or denied the Iranian account. I mean, Iran has been inconsistent with this as well. They initially said that they didn't do it. The Shaheds have to have some end-of-flight human-in-the-loop capability. The early videos where it's hitting specific rooms and hotels is suspicious without a human in the loop. No, it's not. They get the targets ahead of time, and then they strike it. They get the targets from maybe other foreign countries, and their better surveillance capabilities, or maybe Iranian indigenous surveillance capabilities, take the priority targets and they lob them afterwards. Anyways,
shut down that key waterway since the early days of this conflict. So it ultimately will be up to President Trump, though, just to decide how to move forward here. The key thing to watch for is, will this response be proportional, or will this be something that escalates the conflict further?
Zach, last month, you and our colleague Natasha Bertrand reported that Iran had restarted building drones. It had re-upped its drone production during the ceasefire. Is there any reflection on the part of administration officials that this ceasefire being dragged out now, weeks and weeks, is giving Iran these capabilities?
Yeah, Brianna, that's something that we hear from sources and U.S. officials in private for sure, but we have not heard the president in particular or Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth voice the similar concern, really painting a more optimistic and a more confident view of the damage that the U.S. military has inflicted on the Iranians' capabilities. But like you mentioned, we reported that the Iranians have been using this time, this ceasefire, to reconstitute many of its military capabilities, and it's already restarted production on some of these attack drones that, as we've seen today, are capable of taking down an Apache helicopter, also a threat to U.S. Navy ships and commercial ships alike.
Look, this is a war that the U.S. and Israel started, and the president was very clear that he wanted it to be over very quickly. And time again, things have happened as that's what happens in war, that sets back his desire for a deal.
Yeah, we have heard so many times that a deal is in the offing. Sometimes last week he said potentially as soon as this weekend. He told farmers in Wisconsin that the fertilizer costs that skyrocketed because of the war would be down in 90 days because he was going to take care of this.
Let me just interrupt. Sorry, Dasha, just to play what the president said last night about this very thing.
And now they both agreed through me to stop, and we're in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal that will not allow in any way, shape, or form nuclear weapons, etc. And the strait will open up right away. It'll open up immediately upon signing, which could be in 2 or 3 days.
2 or 3 days. And there he was talking about Iran and Israel and the fire that's been going back and forth there. But if you look back, our colleague Aaron Blake did a terrific report that you can see on CNN.com. Since this ceasefire started 2 months ago, the president has at least 38 times said some version of a deal is around the corner.
Yeah, and he's been really pushing for diplomacy here, and he has been calling this a ceasefire. It's really a ceasefire only by the president's definition, which he recently said just means a more moderate amount of shooting for that region, because you have seen a very hot Middle East in the wake of all of this.
Yeah, and I think she's right. The president believes that there can still be some shooting and the ceasefire holds. But
yeah, but that's not how a ceasefire works, is it? I mean, that makes no sense. Like, words, what are they? What do they mean? How do words work? You can't say it's a fucking ceasefire if there's no cessation of fire.
I've seen him so hesitant to restart these kinetic attacks. Even last night, he said, we could bomb, that's an option, but the Strait of Hormuz would be closed for much longer. What has been much more helpful, he said, I'm paraphrasing, is the blockade. And so obviously we're learning more about we need to learn more about what the president's going to do. I've asked whether or not he's going to be in the Situation Room monitoring, haven't heard back. And then a CENTCOM commander, or the CENTCOM commander, who has been the leading role of kind of announcing to the public what has been happening kinetically, including those responses to those boat strikes that we've seen over the last 2 weeks, is supposed to be briefing at 2 p.m. on the Hill. Remains to be seen if that's still going to happen.
And it also, because it takes two to tango, it also says something that Iran is so brazen that they shot down Apache helicopters.
That doesn't sound like someone who's working towards a deal to end all of this, not just, making the shooting less frequent, but ending it entirely. It shows that ending wars, they're easy to start, very hard to end. And Donald Trump has been, making promises that are easier said than done.
And we just have something else in. This is from the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, which was posted right before President Trump posted what we reported to you. And the Iranian speaker said, "We prefer the language of diplomacy, but we speak other languages far more fluently. Break your commitments and we'll switch to what we speak best. You ride the horse you saddled." Wow.
Wow. You talk about brazen. This is pretty brazen, and the fact that Iran has kind of used Trump's own style online in response to him is pretty striking. I mean, we were not hearing this kind of language and these kinds of threats out of Iran until very recently.
And so much of this conflict has been a strike would happen, and it was unclear how high that strike was ordered because of the inability, because of after those strikes that took out those top leaders, the inability for one side of the Iran government and military to talk to the other. And I think that Donald Trump has, for a couple different times, said, those strikes are happening because they're not talking to the people. Those strikes are happening because they're not talking to the people. And so with that tweet, is he going to say that again?